Okay, welcome to Double Barrel Non-Duality. We do this once a month on the channel, Simply Always Awake. We do it for our sustaining members and higher. These are paid members, and anyone can join and ask questions, talk to us face-to-face. It's myself and another non-duality facilitator or a different type of facilitator sometimes, but people who can answer your questions and reflect on your experience, whether it has to do with awakening, whether it has to do with emotion and shadow work, and so forth. So today's guest, this month's guest, is Lisa. I interviewed her, Lisa Malcolm. I interviewed her, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe. And it was a great interview, a lot of good feedback from viewers. And yeah, so she agreed to join us here, and I will have her say hi to you guys.
Hi, Angelo. Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So what we do is we just have people put their hands up, and I will just call on people with their hand up, and then we'll answer your question, either myself or Lisa or both, depending on what flows here. So let's just start with Jacob. And if you're not talking, try to mute yourself so that background noise doesn't affect the recording.
Awesome. Hey, how you going?
Hey, how's it going, buddy?
It's things are going pretty well. Since the retreat in Australia, there's been definitely things have been opening up, and like it feels like there's insight has opened, but like there's always a but, right? Yeah, there's been a fair bit of emotion in the last few weeks, and I'm really just, I'm trying to do like intentional shadow work, doing internal family systems, going to therapy, just sort of, I'm really just trying to allow things to be there, not trying to push and pull. Like a lot of the intense seeking energy is sort of it's changing to more like a fascination, I guess, and just like, an enjoyment of the process. There's still that tendency to just like constantly inquire and look, I guess. I don't really have, just like the way my life is structured, I have very little time for like sort of like just formal meditation. I'm just sort of like inquiring on the go, or, like being mindful when I'm driving my car to work and that sort of thing. But yeah, I guess just like how to like, and even like questions of like, oh, am I awake? Like sometimes it's like, oh, I'm awake. And it's like, oh, I'm not awake. And it's like, oh, well, they're just thoughts anyway. It doesn't really matter. But there is still that sense of like a reasonable amount of reactivity. Because like equanimity isn't really fully online for sure. So reactivity, there's still like, and it's like it's like grosser layers of resistance and identification seem to be like they're sort of seen through, but now there's like just feel there's all these other deeper, more fundamental resistances. If that makes sense as a question at all, go for it. Thank you.
Yeah, it does. Lisa, do you want to start? Do you have anything to say specifically, or should I start? Or
why don't you start, Angelo?
okay, I will. So yeah, as far as your reflections post retreat, I would say overall, based on what you said, this sounds pretty typical. After significant shift, after significant insight, it really is the case that a lot of this repressed material just comes to the surface. It just comes up into consciousness. A lot of emotion. We'll notice our own resistance patterns, even though we notice them and we know there's really nothing behind them. They'll still happen, and we'll find ourselves almost like watching it from the outside and the inside simultaneously. Some things sort of just have to play themselves out. At the same time, there is value to inquiry in this, and specifically based on what you said, I would recommend just inquiry into anything that causes triggering. anything that causes reactivity. Because I think that's probably where you're going to find the most bang for your buck at this point, is just looking into what it is that causes me to react. And when it happens, the situation, it's good to just identify the situation, but you can get deeper into it. You can look even closer and see, like, what were my expectations here that were not met? Because that's usually what it is. Usually it's we have a set of expectations or beliefs about what's going to happen or what should happen or what that person should do or say that they didn't. And
Mm,
that's usually where we get a habituated reaction. Now we can even see that's unreasonable. We can see, like, well, there's no reason I should be upset with that person, but that's not the same thing as seeing where the reaction forms. So don't, like, bypass it by intellectually understanding that, like, yeah, in my heart of hearts, I'm not really angry at that person, and yet there's a reaction going. So go to
mm,
the reaction and go, wait a minute. Well, what is my expectation in this situation? What do I expect from that situation or person that's not being provided? That's where you're going to find the
mm,
reaction trigger. And if you do it right, you'll find yourself in this kind of uncomfortable gap, and you can learn to stay in that gap and then really look and see, like, is the mechanism of reaction as real as I think it is? And only by looking directly at it in that way will it finally just unhook itself. And it may have to be done in various situations, but the beauty of this kind of work is, if the triggers are coming, then you have access. If the triggers are coming, you have raw material to work with, right? There's some aspects of this realization process and so forth that are really subtle and can be slippery because they're so subtle. This isn't usually subtle. It's just that the experience isn't subtle. It's very gross and very obvious, right? It's like it's intense or whatever. What's a little tricky about it, though, is that there's something strongly habituated to not look at it. That's it. There's something that'll just want to distract or look somewhere else, or so that's the challenge here. It's not the subtlety, it's the habitual distraction or habitual avoidance of seeing clearly, really, that there is no mechanism, but you have to get close to it to see that, and see that there's really no um there's no actual reason I have to react to anything. Specifically in this situation, there's no actual reason I have to react to this set of expectations being not met, but you have to go really close to find that. You can't intellectualize it. So hopefully that's helpful.
yeah, it's like a habituated like contraction because what I guess I'm noticing is like I'm really sort of paying attention to my body, and there's always just like a tightening up, and then attention, like like thoughts just react to that sensation.
Yeah.
That
Yep. And one thing that's helpful when you notice that physical contraction, the body contracting, you may actually see it physically contracting. It may just be one part of your body, like your head going down, your arms going in. It does help to open your body, like just physically open, sit up, sit back, stand up, move around, take deeper breaths, do intuitive movement, but see if you can just, like, literally just open the energies, open the physical form of the body, which will sort of open those energies, allow the energies to move a little differently. That may sound like again, like a subtle thing, but once you tune into what that means, it's actually really helpful. And then you can kind of do that inquiry from a much more broad space or a much more open space or a much more spontaneous and simple space than the feeling of struggling against a contraction. Because we interpret the body that continues to interpret the contraction as more contraction, but really we can sort of open that up a bit just physically and then energetically.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Lisa, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I'll just share a little bit. Hi, Jacob. I think your process is going amazing, because it seems like you have a really good ability to tune into your emotion work that's coming up. And that I find that really goes a long way in this whole thing that's happening when you can really tune in, and you were sort of specifying that you were tuning into things that were more on a grouse level versus, a lighter, more like a less loud level. Maybe you can see the difference there. And these sort of conditionings, which are basically just habits formed in the body, I always see these as like a broken record or a record with a needle caught in a groove. And some of the grooves with the needle caught in the groove is very, very deep. And so as awakening is coming through you, coming through the person, the body, it's putting a lot of pressure onto it's putting a lot of pressure on all of these conditionings. And so the conditionings or the habits, you know, which are basically the idea that is then gets associated with a certain sensation in the body and then interpreted as a certain belief or a theme or anything like that. So as the awakening is pushing and putting pressure on these conditionings, the ones that are sort of more ready to go, they'll just pop, and then it'll really work on like the deeper ones. But being so aware of your process just makes this whole thing, I find, just so much easier, just being engaged with that. And that's just going to help you so much more in the long run, because if you because it gives the body a better sort of foundation and a grounding to open up to more unfoldment in your awakening. So I don't know if that was helpful, but I just felt inspired to just share that because I just found your process quite, it does remind me of myself. So, you know, attention to detail there. So you just keep doing whatever's on your plate, you know, whatever emotion or sensation or belief or resistance is coming up, you know, in the moment, that's what's on your plate in the moment. And that's all you need to sort of be with, you know, you don't have to worry about all the others. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacob. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, let's move on to Lubina.
Hey, Angelo.
Hello. It's been a while.
Hi. 2 days in a row. I'm enjoying this. So I really wanted to talk about a couple of things that have been coming up for me that feel pretty sticky. The first thing that's coming up is, I mean, it's just how it appears for me, is it feels like one of the strongest identities that I hold. And that's one of a wronged woman, a victimized woman, a wrong woman, having been at the hands of mostly men, but also just like society at large, just like beating me down, right? And that's been coming up as seeing it for what it is. It's a story that has components to it of happenings throughout my life and seems to repeat itself over and over again. And I'm finally at a point where it doesn't make sense to hold on to it anymore. And along with that, I mean, I've always had like anger and rage. They're like my best friend. You know, I always say that, like, it's the emotion that I'm the most comfortable with because I know it so well inside out, you know, having had to deal with it for a very long period of time. And what I'm watching is that this emotion has a big role to play in that story. So it has that charge, that like sensation, and it goes directly into my solar plexus and my gut. That's where I feel it, the contraction on a somatic level. And hand in hand with it, what I'm also observing is, I saw that video you posted of the 3 demons that plague us during the awakening process. And I would say that my demon is most certainly competitiveness. Like it's definitely my thing. You know, I'm always comparing myself to like who's more awake or in this part of my life. But it's kind of a general theme of my life where I just want to be the best at everything, you know, and achieve the best and get the best. And at the same time, there's that play of like the victim, and they're kind of showing up simultaneously, and I'm watching them and I'm watching how it plays out in interactions and relationships, but also just like energetically, I'm feeling how I move with that. So anything you have to say about it would be great.
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple comments and then see what Lisa says. But first of all, I appreciate your vulnerability. Like, it's not always easy to say those things about yourself, and yet what you're saying is not untrue of anybody. Like everybody has some degree of these experiences within themselves and so forth. Sometimes it becomes more of a fixation, or it's, just a more prominent part of our personality or our internal makeup or whatever. But we all have these aspects to our psyche, of course. Specifically to the identity of being victimized. Now, when I talk about this, please, anyone listening, understand that I would never invalidate the fact that people get victimized, like physically victimized, emotionally victimized, financially victimized. Like you can be victimized in a lot of different ways. And that does happen, and it happens frequently. And all of us probably have, well, all of us have to some degree or another, but some of us have been victimized in very, very fundamental ways at very young ages, in pervasive ways, and in our developmental stages. That's a whole different ball game than saying, you got ripped off buying a car one time and that was it or something. So there's a vast range and variety of the types of traumas we've had this way. So I would never invalidate any of that. What I can say is, once you get to the point where you're at, which is a really good place actually, where you start to see like, maybe I actually don't need that part of my identity right now, or maybe or anymore. Maybe I'm actually moving beyond that somehow. That's a really good place to be, because what I think it comes down to is this. It comes down to presence always, but in any given moment, you can ask yourself, like, right now, right here in this moment, does any memory about any identity that feels like me in any way from the past at all, does that actually come to bear on this moment in a way that's meaningful or helpful to me at all? And your instinct will know right then. And it often will be no, like, oh, actually, no, I'm free right here. There's no victim or victimizer here. There's no past, present, or future here. There's really only what's here. This is it, and it's felt and it's seen and it's heard, right? Other times you may have a different answer though. Something may say, no, there's something I really need to address here. There's some trauma that's still stuck here that needs to be addressed. And it's actually wanting to speak right now. It is coming into this moment. And that's okay too. If that's the case, that's okay too. And that may be a direct result of trauma, a direct result of being victimized at some point in your life. But if that comes, that's okay. Don't say, no, there's only presence, there's only this, and just get rid of that, push it away. That's not a good idea. So again, trust your intuition on what quality of presence is most appropriate right now. And it may be a totally empty quality of presence, empty of time, empty of space, empty of dimension, empty of duality, and it'll feel very, very settled and peaceful and so forth. But there also may be a quality of presence that's like, no, something in here really needs to like shout. It needs to have a voice. It needs to be explored right now. That's okay too. That's totally okay. It can be an emotion, could be even a memory, anything. If that's the case, there are a whole bunch of modalities, as we all know. There are somatic modalities, therapy modalities, inquiry modalities, feeling in, internal family systems. Like there's a million ways to approach this. But what I would say is, try to, even as you work through this, try to remind yourself, like, I want to give my full attention to what's actually here right now, in whatever form it's in whatever messaging it has to give me right now in this moment. That's where I want to put my attention, because if I start to think about the past or future, I'm already distorting reality a little bit. And I want to honor what's here right now. And it could be some ancient energy that you have the karmic, I don't know what, burden to address. And then that's okay. That's here. That's what needs to be addressed. And it'll feel rather physical. It'll feel energetic at that point. Then it does. And be okay with that. Just be okay with that. Just say, okay, that's what's here right now. And whatever quality of presence appears right here, right now, is okay. And know, as you enter the world of as-isness, which is what we're talking about, there's never 100% anything. So there will be more and more time where you will know that past does not really exist. That the victim story, the victim narrative, it actually doesn't actually exist right here. It's not here in a very real way. And that's okay. But don't extrapolate that into every moment saying it should never be here, because that's not going to be the case. Again, it could pop up at any time. And when it does, like I said, if you can use that litmus test of your intuition to know whether it's relevant to do some work in it right now, and trust that, then you'll be okay. And I think what you'll find is more and more, you'll just find yourself dropping into this like truly no narrative reality where it's like, wow, it's so clear. There's nothing from the past. There's no burden of past, but it's because you're open to it that you can afford, that you can enjoy that, because if something does come, you're okay with it. You're okay with all qualities of presence. That's what actually affords you that liberation into the complete unbinding that's available right now all the time. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the two are probably tied together. Like, you have that fire spirit, and that fiery spirit tends to be competitive, tends to have some competitive qualities, or more competitive qualities than the typical person. But the beauty of it is, if you see that there's a connection there between the sort of anger and the fact that you were victimized in life in various ways, and the competitiveness, if you put them together and see them kind of as they relate to one another, it can offer like a really beautiful key. And that is something like, I mean, you can do this exploration on your own, but it's something like, because I was hurt at such a early developmental stage multiple times, I formed this view of myself as someone who is less than or has less than,
Yeah.
and that leads to the competitiveness, and that's
Mhm.
it. It's a perception. It's literally a perception, number one. And if you can put all that together and like hold it all at once by being willing to touch everything at once and whatever appears and whatever quality of presence appears, then this will clarify, I think. And then number two, just reassure yourself and remind yourself that when it comes to realization specifically, in regards to everything else in the world, this may not be the case, but with realization, it is the case. It just has nothing to do with anyone else. It will always be a distortion. Every single time you try to imagine what someone else's experience is or their enlightenment, or it's just always a distortion. You're not actually thinking about them. It's just a thought. You're thinking about a thought. You're thinking about a vasana or some reflection in the mind. You can't actually know about their realization. It's impossible, because there's no one out there, there's no one in here. So it's always going to be a distortion. So that really can like free up a lot of your energy when you really digest that. It can also lead to grief, because you have to let go of that. You have to let go of the one that's been fueling your energy by being competitive with them, even though it's nebulous, even though it's not someone specific. It may be, but it may not be. So then there is something you're letting go of there too. So be open to grief. And that's the last thing I wanted to say to you is, not always, but often people who are more comfortable with anger are less comfortable with grief, and vice versa, actually. So that may or may not be the case, but don't be surprised if grief kind of shows up in the mix as well, which it probably has already anyway. But those are the things that I'm picking up from what you said.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Angelo covered everything perfectly, obviously. But I'll just add one little point, because I relate to you so well. I especially relate about the anger is your best friend, because it's always been my best friend too. But the victim identity is so strong in the human condition. It's probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, sort of conditioning. So, and this is just for everybody watching too, that may be like tapping into this aspect of their emotion work. But these kind of conditionings or programs or templates, whatever they are, sometimes, well, oftentimes, especially one that's this strong, needs time. It will kind of go through a lightening process. So it's not something that can be just sort of processed all at once, until you kind of get to that place where disidentifying with it entirely becomes quite easy or simple. But until then, if the record groove is still quite deep, like just allow yourself to be okay with it's going to keep cropping up. You might feel like you sort of made progress with sort of releasing or disidentifying with the victim template pretty good. But then after a little while, a few months, few weeks, few months down the road, it might just pop up again. And you might think, oh God, no, it's still here. And you just keep working with it as it comes up, and just know that this is normal, because it's quite a heavy duty one. So, but eventually it will keep lightening until finally there is that disidentification entirely with the whole thing. So
Yeah,
thanks.
I can relate to that, because I definitely felt in the past, I definitely felt like, oh, I worked through that, you know, and now it's like it's just showing up. It feels more visceral than at any other point so far, you know.
Well, sometimes it can go through different levels of the human, where it can be very focused mental, especially in the beginning. But then as you start sort of chipping away at it and breaking it down, you'll start getting in touch with it in the physical body. And that's when it starts to feel visceral. And then it can feel like wild and just loaded with rage. And it's in the body. And so it might seem like, oh, I just went backwards, or what's going on here. But really, no, you're getting to the deeper level of it, which is in the body. But that usually comes last. The body work usually comes last. It's kind of like the last frontier of, the illusion of victim. And I don't mean that as Angela was explaining it, but ultimately
Don't worry,
will,
I'm not
that,
taking
that
it
will,
like that.
ultimately that will be seen. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not taking it like that at all. So it's fine. I know my stories well, and I also see that they're stories. So, it's just like you said, it's the deeper layer now. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll drop to the bottom for fun. We're going to go to Morgan.
Hello.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hi. First time here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Actually, that's good timing because I just my question feeds off directly off the previous one. I think I emotionally broke fourth and fifth fetter, and I bought myself a box of donuts, which is great. It's ill will and desire, and so that direct in my interpretation is like it directly feels off victimization, and I'm kind of the opposite. I'm more the air personality. So I get blown away by emotions. And so, there are some days where I just lay down and just feel in process. And I have a massage chair, I do body work on it. But here's the thing though, I have a job. I need to work. For people like me, who's like when it gets really visceral, how do you stop the wave? Yeah, and do your daily responsibilities and live your life, because sometimes it's really difficult to do that. So that's my question.
Good question. Well, Lisa is an energy worker. She may have some good answers for you.
Okay. That's great. The fourth and fifth fetters. That's awesome. What always comes to me is awakening is what's pushing and doing this process, and it will, like I was talking to the first speaker, awakening comes and it pushes and puts a lot of pressure on what's able to be pressured, so it'll hit sort of the top layers of the layers that are ready to go. And so even though you're at work, awakening is always sort of going for balancing. It wants to, but you know what I mean? It wants to balance everything. And so, if it hits you at work, like really what can you do except do your best and recognize, okay, I just need to try to just balance this a little bit and just have faith in this process and just keep going. There's not really a lot you can do, because awakening is going to actually ultimately balance everything: work balance, work life commitments, emotional waves. It's ultimately aiming for like a good balance of a little bit of everything. And so just know that eventually this will all balance out, and you just keep doing your best at work with what you can. So that's
it's just challenging, because it's easier when it's like, well, they did that to me, and I'm gonna be mad at them, and it's just, there's no me, there's no them, there's just mad. So
yeah.
It's challenging, but I'll just I know eventually it'll even out. It's like every level of this game gets harder. Thank you.
So I just have a little bit to add. I guess it's something we don't always talk about, is when reactivity goes away, it like brings you to another challenge, and that is, like you just said, you can't blame anyone for anything anymore. Like, it doesn't work. You can't stabilize yourself into some story about how you've been wronged and this and that and whatever. It's like you just feel it. It's like wide open. It's going to move through. I'm also in that airy space with you, like air sign, and so yeah, I can absorb so much, and I do absorb so much. I don't even talk about it. I just feel it. And as you said, giving yourself space to like just lay down and just let it process is important for sure. Meditation, just sitting there doing literally nothing at all and letting it process through the energetic system. You will get more efficient at that, so to speak. The word efficient is a little weird, but it does. I think you get more efficient at it as the identity clears out. The identity is what holds it, what captures it, and keeps it in the system and makes it process slowly. The ultimate answer that is actually is a relatively concrete answer, but it takes time, that I found, is when it comes to work and it comes to like dynamic environments and environments that could be triggering and environments that are energetically charged and so forth with humans. What ultimately does the trick is when the non-dual clarity becomes really poignant. And what happens then is instead of, it's hard to explain it, but I'm going to try to explain it. Instead of processing, it's like almost instead of processing it within consciousness, within the conscious knowing of the energetic space that we would call me, it's actually sort of dissipated out into the infinite non-dual fields. It's dissipated out into infinite clarity in real time. Actually, it's just very different. I don't know how to explain it, but I can tell you 99% will feel like really heavy and hard to move energy through, but 100% it's like super clear, and the energy moves very effortlessly through, and it's not captured or accumulated. That's what I find, but you have to be willing to really, really trust and clarify the non-dual nature of all appearance, presence, moment to moment. It gives all experience an infinite container to dissipate into, and you will move very fluidly. And so then it doesn't matter how busy an environment is, or it doesn't matter the texture of the environment. It's still completely available. Actually, it's pretty wild. The mind will never understand this. It's just, there's no way, because the mind thinks in things in terms of like how much and how little and how long, and like it's just you can't process this that way, because it's literally not subject to time at all, or space. And so it becomes rather enjoyable, I would say, but you have to be willing to go through all of those stuck textures as you're doing, to loosen it all up and find the non-dual nature in all of it. And so you have to look through everything, and that life will make sure you do that. So it's okay. It's definitely okay. And it will clarify in those more busy, energetically dense, at least as far as human consciousness textures of work, things like that. It will clarify over time for sure. Just trust it.
That makes sense, actually, because I was thinking of like you put energy in a box and putting it aside for later, but the idea of just airing it out like a bad smell.
It's different. Yeah, it's quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because without realizing it, or maybe we do somewhat realize it, or we have a mental model, but that's exactly what we do, is we try to compartmentalize our life. And that's what part of what reactivity does, is like we can like bottle it up and push this down and push ourselves up in our mind and tell ourselves our story about how mad we are about that person that did this, and then take it home and then drink some wine and do this or whatever, all the things we do. But this world, you can't compartmentalize anymore. But the tendency to try to do that will be so uncomfortable. That is what contraction is. So it actually reverses to where it's like the energy just goes, it's like it just flows outward. I don't know how else to explain it. It just flows outward into an infinite sink. And it's rather enjoyable, and nothing accumulates. It'll change your
Nice.
behavior in subtle ways too, that it'll change your behavior in subtle ways that you cannot predict. It has to be fresh, spontaneous, and coming directly from this moment's empty, radiant nature. It has to come from that. And as long as you keep your finger on that pulse, so to speak, it will work.
Thanks.
Sure.
Very hard.
Yeah. Good question. Okay. Let's move on to right in the middle. We got Michael. Almost in the middle.
Hey, that's Michael.
Yay, what's up?
Hey, doing great. Yeah, well, as you just said to Morgan, keeping your pulse on the empty, radiant nature of things, um, that's really tough for me, or at least the sense of separation from that is maybe synonymous or equivalent to the feeling of suffering. And so I think I went through a few weeks of a, let's say, like nihilistic phase where after seeing through some things and letting some things go, there's a tendency to keep doing that. And in that tendency to keep doing that, it starts to kind of get to apply to everything, which then becomes kind of like a spirit of denial that's just like denying all the time, right? Oh, well, like, this tree isn't quite this tree. There's something more real to it. So you deny that. And you just like keep going until it's this flywheel, and like every thought can start to feel super uncomfortable, even if it's like a curious, like, oh, well, like, who is the one that just happened to? It's like, yeah, that's just a conditioned response at this point. Like at different times it's had power to it to transcend, but then sometimes it's just like, like, okay, not pointing. Anyway, I actually had a much more direct question, which I think points at like that seat of denial or nihilism, which in some ways, yeah, I saw the thing that says no, 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 no. Okay, who's saying no? Until that creates enough of a paradox that it like freed me from it. So that's great. But when I go to that neutral space that feels like the doorway or whatever that Sasha talked about in an interview, sometimes now what actually happens is I'm like, sweet, take the step. Like I'm going there. It's like one more step, like in free fall, fear, cool. Like I'm down with that. Like, let's go. And then I shudder, like my back spasms somewhat violently and literally shakes me out of that experience. And that's happened a few times now. My one like giant awakening experience had the back shuddering thing, but things felt so clear. I was just like, oh, like who's that happening to? And that's what sucked me out of my body mind for a little bit. But these times there's no getting around it. It's like whatever is up with the back like has to be dealt with at back level, but I don't know how to operate at back level.
Okay. I love how the synchronicity when we have a person who's an energy worker, among other things, the questions are around these energetics. Anyway, Lisa, do you have something to say to that?
Well, I can relate to some extent because I did have sort of a fear barrier reaction to an awakening as well last year. And so when the nervous system is sort of producing that kind of a physical response, then it seems that there could be some backlog of nervous system tension. And for me, and this doesn't mean that this would work for you or for just anybody, but once I had that experience, but then the fear in the nervous system sort of shut it down. I proceeded a few months later to do TRE and the trauma and tension releasing exercises. And that actually sort of discharged my nervous system. And just in a few months, it all depends on how big the charge load is in the nervous system, and it's different for everybody. And then, I mean, while I did notice distinctly 6 months later that the TRE just by itself actually made a difference in the level of calm and grounding in my body. So something like that, like a somatic modality that gets into the actual body, I think would be maybe good to look at here as an option.
Sure, thanks. I have examined TRE a little bit and found exercises that like work through the legs. Do you think that um do you know of a way to like maybe bring it toward where the problem seems to be, which is this like upper left back region?
Yeah, that's the trick. Because you have to allow it to do its own thing. And so if it's working with the legs, then that's what needs to discharge first. You can't really have control over it. And I'm not an expert in TRE, but I did learn about it from Chris. I don't know if you know Chris Gimon, may have heard of her on this channel. She's a TRE guide. And her advice to me when I started to do it was do it more than you think you need. Because the mind will come and say, well, I don't think I need to do this too much. And she said, just bypass that and do it at least 3 times a week in the beginning. Even if you don't feel like it's doing anything or it's not doing what you want it to do, or it's not doing what you think it should be doing, you want it to go directly to the back, but it's not, it's staying sort of in the legs. You have to override that because those are just sort of the commentary that's kind of going with everything. And really with the TRE, I find that it mostly does focus on the pelvic sort of area in general, some legs. So when I did it, at least, I never actually felt it go all the way up the back. Most of the tremoring was done in the pelvic and some in the legs and just maintained there. So yeah. So be watchful of trying to sort of control things on your own. Just sort of let the process do what it wants to do. If it wants to be in the legs, that's where it needs to be. Does that make sense?
It does, yes, thank you. And I think and part of why it was in the legs was maybe doing leg workouts to lead up to it. So I don't know, maybe I'd try back workouts if it happens to line up. Great, but I'll follow that of just letting it go where it goes and do it more than feels like
Yes.
was necessary.
Yeah, and the tremoring in the legs is actually working with the entire root center system, the root energy system. So that covers the back, the lower back, the pelvic area, the legs anyway. So it is doing the job. It is actually doing the job on the entire nervous system. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll try that out. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, also, I agree. The TRE. The other thing is you can do like Chris recommends if you learn TRE on your own, which she endorses. But she recommends if you've done it for a while, it can be really helpful to work with a facilitator, even for one time. They can do it over Zoom. And a lot of times this is what they do is they can help you move that into other parts of the body, or they can just see things because they have a lot of experience that and make suggestions that can change that. And so those are exactly the kind of things she recommends for working with someone specific. Maybe worthwhile trying, but I've seen people have pretty amazing effects from TRE.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like the right place to be. So I'll check that
Awesome.
out.
Thank you. Okay, let's go up to Federico.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's cool. Like I feel like everybody's questions are kind of the same, but in a different way. So let me just ask in my way to see how it helps me. So there's a couple things going on in my mind right now. The first one is like I have found there's a lot of resistance to like offering acceptance and love and space to repressed emotions and thoughts. Like, I know that that's one of the ways to approach it. Just talk to them, say it's okay to be here. You have space, you're loved, etc. But then there's a strong voice that says, no, you don't. You're not accepted here. Go away. So that tension basically makes it worthless. Like, I think it just creates even more tension, you know? So I'm starting to wonder, like, should I just drop that practice altogether and just find other ways? I'm beginning to wonder, like, just maybe just being connected to the awareness is the same offering of love to that emotion. I don't know. So that would be like my first question, like, how should I offer that love if I'm not basically able to do it like with thoughts? And the second one is, I have started to feel a couple times, and one happened in this Zoom meeting. Like, I've been able to feel a lot of emotions and just feel them expanding, like as you were talking, like maybe into a more non-dual space. And it's very, very intense, but I thought that was it. Like, okay, yeah, I have gotten to the deep stuff. But now I have started to feel like some fear that is like not common, but sometimes I can find it, that says like, I think there's something really more deep than that, and I cannot freaking like imagine what could be. So I'm not starting to wonder, like, is that fear the thing that's keeping everything together, like all the contraction together? So, yeah, those are the couple questions.
Yeah, you're in good territory for sure. So the first question, my thought was, or my feeling actually was, how to practice metta, or how to practice that compassion or love without thoughts. And the real answer is through feeling. So when you encounter anything or anyone, whether it's a person, a face, a dog, a tree, an emotion, a situation, or just a moment, ask yourself, do I feel love for this right now? And just find the physical sensation. Find it. It may be in the heart space. It may not necessarily be where your heart is, but I would just see, is the feeling, the direct experience of love already here in regards to this, whatever this is. That I would keep it that simple. Thoughts are complicated. This is simple. So I that's the answer to number one. Number two, that's my answer at least. Number two was remind me what specifically you asked there on number two.
Yeah, it's that I thought that the shadow work, the deep shadow work, had begun for me, and I have felt like
Yeah.
a lot of
Okay. So that experience, I like how you said it, that the fear comes, and then the story of the fear is there may be something much deeper that I'm not in contact with, which is funny because I know it's not funny when it's happening, but the fear, that pure raw emotion of fear, that's a really good place to be in a sense. That's really kind of a gateway, or maybe it's a catalyst. But it's funny how we bounce up into the mind, and then the mind tries to do its best to try to orient to what's actually going on, although it kind of can't. But it can kind of get it right in a weird way sometimes. And it's kind of getting it right and knowing that, yeah, the fear is saying that there may be something vastly deeper than this. And that's true. That's exactly what it is. The fear is just your experience of unbinding whatever it is that's sort of obscuring the vastness of that depth of that realization that you're touching. That's it. There's no narrative to this. I'm not saying it's going to take this long, or this is going to happen, or what it's going to mean to you. You can't know any of that. I'm just saying, you're in a good place with the fear, with that sensation. Yeah. Yeah. Lisa, do you have anything to add? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. I was just gonna add something small, but maybe Lisa can go first.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on your first question about love. And for me, I've always felt that just practicing letting everything be exactly as it is is the best sort of conveyance of love. And anytime there is a thought that comes in, regardless of what it is, then that's always going to be something that's trying to take you out of that present experience with whatever it is that you're feeling. So it is about staying in the more feeling realm versus listening to the thoughts. The thoughts will always try to oppose and counteract all of this process, because that's just the nature of thoughts. So that's all I wanted to share on that.
Yeah, no, that's great. To the first point is really helpful, both of you. Thanks. And to the second one, then I just wonder, then I not worry about, oh, this fear is gonna destroy me if I go to a place that the fear doesn't want to go. Should I just focus on feeling the fear with the same love, or what should I do then? Yeah.
I would use the same approach. Yeah. I mean, when the fear arises, if it's possible, try to stick with it as best you can. But, like with the previous speaker, with Michael, when he was talking about his body would actually sort of kick him out of the present experience. And there's not really a lot you can do in that moment. But if that's not happening, you stay with it as best you can. That's really the only way to go through those fear experiences. And it'll work eventually. Yeah, it will. It's the right time.
Yeah. Thanks.
Go through that gateway.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.